Good morning, St. Francis, and good morning, people of God. It is Monday, the 22nd of November, 2021. It is Monday of the 34th and last week in Ordinary Time as we move to the close of our church year for 2020-2021. It is also the memorial of Saint Cecilia, patron saint of all musicians, including our famed musician here at St. Francis, Jim Wall, as well as all the other people who assist in our music ministry here, who offer their voices and their talents to give praise to God. Saint Cecilia, one of the most ancient of the memories of our church that we keep within our calendar, within our tradition, a 2nd century martyr, I believe, again, who did not give herself over to the demands of Roman government, that she denounced her Christianity, that she worshiped the gods, but she kept professing her faith, not only in the God of Israel, but in Jesus as the Christ. Because of that, she suffers martyrdom, and she is remembered in the Eucharistic prayer, the first Eucharistic prayer, which means that, again, her tradition, the tradition of remembering her, goes back into the early church. So remembering all of those who play music, not just church musicians, but all musicians in all shapes and styles, that they give glory and praise in however they do it, in whichever way they do it, to God's wonder and majesty that has given them the ability to perform such great work through their voice and through their talents. Today, in this last week of our year, again, we move from Maccabees, again, which introduces the beginning of our move to the last week, to the end of our church year. We now hear from the book of Daniel. Again, the book of Daniel, which sort of opens up for us the possibility of life after death. Judaism does not always hold to a life after death. It is this life that matters, this life that needs to be lived in a particular way with all of its blessings as well as its challenges. But Daniel begins to open up the possibility that maybe something more lies beyond death. And so the hints of resurrection in Daniel, something to lead us into the end of this church year and the fulfillment of God's promises. It begins a very interesting way. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, having again taken the Israelites from Israel as Babylon took over and conquered Israel, now basically looks for some attendance out of the Jews that are now in captivity. And it is Daniel and 3 other guys, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, who will become attendants to Nebuchadnezzar in one way. And the question is raised, again, being attendant to Nebuchadnezzar, should they eat meats sacrificed to the gods, or should they, maintain their Jewish practices? Because if they were to do so, not only would they no longer become attendants, but they could probably also die. And so what happens is that the 3 youths, and I'm forgetting myself, the 3 youths in Daniel basically say to the guards, give us vegetables to eat and water, and you'll see that we'll be healthier than all the people who are eating meat that's sacrificed to the gods. And so they do, and they are. Again, a lesson to be learned in Daniel is that you should always eat your vegetables. And so that's an important lesson to learn today. We'll see what happens and how Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael, and Daniel fare in the next coming days as their story continues. In Luke's gospel, it is the widow's mite. Again, we heard that in Mark's gospel a couple of Sundays ago. Now we hear it again. Again, this woman who gives everything that she has, not because she feels obligated or forced to do it, but a woman who gives out of love, a woman who gives out of trusting in God's promises, that even though she gives everything that seems to be all she has to live on, God will take care of her. God will not abandon her. God will not lead her to death. Again, we don't really know everything that happens, after that, but Jesus would not have recognized this woman's great act of charity if there was not in some way, for her to be blessed because of it, and not necessarily left to die forlorn, abandoned, and alone. To give all that we are, to give everything that we have, without fear, without fear of consequence, without worrying about, what will happen to us afterwards. Again, it's the stance of every believer of every time and every place. To be people who offer who and what we are to the greater glory of God and the welfare of our brothers and sisters. This is always our mission as believers in the world, and it's important to consider that as we move towards the end of our church year. In what ways have we given of ourselves without counting the cost? Given of ourselves in trust that God will do good with what we have? Given of ourselves knowing that what we do here on earth helps to further the reign of God? And may the Lord give you his peace.